I'm going to walk you through a presentation to give you a sense of some of the opportunities within Rwanda and across the border. Before I get into that, I do have to say, first, it is really my sincere pleasure to be here at the third edition, at least for us, hosting Africa CEO Forum in Kigali. I would say a meeting of the minds, if you agree with me. And we do meet at the time where the world is navigating murky waters and the global economic order is being reconfigured in real time. Supply chains are fragmenting, capital is becoming geopolitical, countries are prioritizing resilience over efficiency. But a wise man once said, never waste a good crisis. I believe his name was Winston Churchill. And this creates a historic opportunity for us as Africans, because for the first time in decades, Africa is not arriving late at the global transformation. The transformation is still unfolding in real time. And Africa's strategic advantages now include demographics, resources, the famous energy transition we've all heard about, minerals, digital leapfrogging, and consumer growth. But one thing remains a challenge: scale. The scale challenge is existential because fragmentation will ultimately not get us to the potential that we know we have as a continent. So let me walk you through how Rwanda is rising up to that challenge. And before I get into the presentation, or as I get into the presentation, I want to start by giving you situating for those who are new in the country and who would want to know where we're located. We like to believe we're the heartbeat of the continent. And as you can tell, we're strategically located within the heart of the continent. And following the, after the tragic genocide against the Tutsi in 1994, we began rebuilding aggressively. And today we have about 14 million people within the country. We have a GDP of about 13.7 billion, and our GDP per capita is increasing up to $1,000 to date. Our literacy rate, which is something we're also proud of because it translates into talent, is up to 76%. And when we look at where we are in terms of our geographic location, we like to believe that we're strategically positioned to give you access or to become a bridge to the region. And here, in close proximity, we have about 85 million people right around us. What does that mean? Within reach. If you look at the map, you'll see that, for example, Dar es Salaam, Kinshasa, Kampala, the capital of these countries seem to be further than some of their districts that we're bordering countries with. And this truly allows us to send the goods that are manufactured in Rwanda to these countries seamlessly. So before I get into the reasons why capital seems to be flowing to Rwanda, I want to say that we understood early on that scale was not just geographical. Scale for us is institutional. And we began building a platform for the region. And the opportunity here is not just for 14 million consumers, but also the 85 that I mentioned, and much, much bigger than that. And here, our positioning is to compete strategically on governance, quality, policy predictability, execution speed, and investor trust. Now let's dive into some of these reasons why capital is flowing into Rwanda. The first one being the gateway to the continent. The second one, I'll talk to you about the investor-friendly climate that we've built and where that has gotten us, and the innovation partnership that we bring to the table, as well as the untapped sectors where the opportunities lie. When we look at our positioning again, here we have invested heavily in our airline, which allows us to connect to 30+ destinations just from Rwanda. And this allows us to become truly a global hub that connects us to different markets. And this becomes our way of becoming a platform for the continent. Our trade reach, in terms of the different regional blocks that we're in, extends to all markets through the AFCFTA, the EAC, COMESA, as well as the European agreements that we have under the Everything But Arms, which allows you to manufacture from Rwanda and export your goods to the European continent with lower tariffs. For the manufacturing sector particularly, we've invested in industrial zones across the country. And here is an example of where some of the industrial zones are located. We have about 8 across the country, 1 being in close proximity to the city, and 1 being located within the city, the Kigali Special Economic Zone. So essentially, we've built an environment where we're structured to help you build from here and scale to the continent. While we want you to build it here, we also want you to keep more of it. And here we've structured a tax incentive scheme that's really competitive and appeals to many of the investors that we see coming to the continent. And I speak of the corporate income tax incentives. These are fiscal incentives, and I'm sure it's music to the ears of our investors. Now, as we put together a structure that allows investors to come and build from Rwanda, our business environment has also been built specifically for that. Our institutional efficiency is key, and we understand that that's what differentiates us in emerging markets. We've truly worked hard to minimize friction by having rapid company registration, investor facilitation, capital mobility in and out. You're allowed to repatriate your capital freely. We have tax competitiveness, as we have shown in the tax incentives, and regulatory clarity, a robust regulatory framework that is predictable and consistent. We understand that in a world where capital moves at the speed of confidence, Rwanda has to become one of Africa's highest trust operating environments, because capital ultimately compounds where friction disappears. And this again speaks to the setup in terms of days, not quarters. And you can put us to test. Try and register your business and see if you can do it in no less than 6 hours and report back to us. Now, the second reason I mentioned earlier why investors look to Rwanda is because we are a partner in their innovation. And what this means here is that regulation is not a barrier. Regulators are rather almost a co-founder. And here, I think Caitlin, who's in the room, will speak to this with the famous example of Zipline, how we were able to work together to come up with a sandbox. And today, they operate at scale on the continent and beyond the continent. For us to be able to do that, we recognize that there's a need for talent, expertise on the continent. And so we've gone ahead and partnered with institutions like Carnegie Mellon, University Africa, the Africa Leadership University, University of Global Health Equity, as well as our very own University of Rwanda, where we're building capacity in terms of their biomedical faculty. And this will speak to the opportunities that we see in pharma later. So let's now look at the sectors. Where are the opportunities? Where are we placing our bets? And where do we invite you to place them with us? And these are really not speculative opportunities. These are large, unmet demand pools. And we're seeing that much like other African nations, Rwanda's next growth phase will be driven by urbanization, healthcare expansion, logistics, modernization, digital finance, food systems, and climate infrastructure. The first sector for us is the mining sector. When we look at what's happening in the world today, we know that there's a rush to minerals. And here there's a few baskets that we've identified in terms of minerals, being the 3 Ts, gold and lithium. And today their opportunities are across the full value chain in terms of exploration, in terms of refinery. We know that beneficiation is a key segment because we want to add value to our minerals and move away from raw extraction to value addition. The next sector, which has been much talked about throughout the day today, is agriculture. Agriculture today for us is a key contributor to our GDP, and we know that 40% of formal jobs are coming from this sector, and the goal is to grow this. And here the opportunities are really within the horticulture segment, where we see about 6 crops that are also growing in terms of demand in key markets. I'll let you read from the screen. There's avocados, there's French beans, chilies. All these value chains have really great potential in Rwanda for you to set up here and export in the identified markets. Fish farming and processing has also become quite an interesting sub-segment within agriculture. And today we have our commercial agribusiness hub, or project that we're calling Gabiro Agribusiness Hub. It's about 15,000 hectares of land. And the idea is to move from rain-fed uncertainty to really go into agricultural at scale, agribusiness at scale. And I see that technology has chosen to fail me at the most opportune time. And so I'll walk you through some of the other sectors that I have planned to project. Another interesting sector for us is real estate. And in real estate, we can see that across the continent, countries are rapidly modernizing and urbanizing. And it's similar today here in Rwanda. The first example here on the slide is the Kigali Innovation City, where we've earmarked an area where we want to create a technology park, to have some of the universities I mentioned earlier, coupled with deep tech companies and startups, as well as research lab centers, and really start exporting knowledge from Rwanda to the rest of the continent using our African talent. The Kigali Green Complex is going to be a very interesting building in the city. Our institutional investor also happens to be our pension fund. We'll speak more in details about it. We have opportunities around the Kigali Gulf resort and villas area, where we want to transform the entire area, perimeter around the Gulf, into really high-end, luxurious destination. In terms of our sports city or sports sector, we also have opportunities within the infrastructure of that supports the sports economy. And right around the Kigali Arena, the stadium, there's what we're calling the Kigali Urban Sports City, with ample opportunities to support us in infrastructure, as well as development centers for various sports. In terms of middle-income housing, there's huge demand as well. Today we're seeing 30,000 units in terms of demand every year, just in Rwanda. And so this gives you the opportunity to really not look at real estate as just as simple as construction, but economic infrastructure. And you can build your proof of concept here in Rwanda and scale it across the continent. Healthcare is also another sector of key importance to us. Back in 2020, I think during the pandemic, this is where I would say fundamentally all countries realized and changed how they approached healthcare. There's a theme of healthcare sovereignty. And today, it's no different for us in Rwanda. It has always been a priority for us, but we're increasingly putting investment into specifically the pharmaceutical industry. And we're building the Kigali Health City, which is going to be a regional platform for hospitals, biotech, medical education, diagnostics, and digital health centers. And this will truly help us address the demand that we see on the continent, both in terms of pharmaceutical and in terms of specialized healthcare. We see a lot of Africans who travel from Africa to go to different countries of parts of the world, and there's no reason why they shouldn't get appropriate medical care on the continent. And so we're positioning the Kigali Health City as that destination. So we invite you to join us. Last but not least, the tourism sector, which is a key backbone of all the sectors that we look at, that happens to be anchored at RDB as well. Here we've really created a name that speaks for itself, a brand that speaks for itself when it comes to tourism in Rwanda. And most of you probably know it by Visit Rwanda and the famous gorilla trekking experience. And recently, if you are all avid watchers of Netflix, you'll see a documentary that speaks to the biodiversity of Rwanda. And it's narrated by the one and only David Attenborough. And so if he doesn't convince you, I think you might be the problem. And across the map here of our country, you can see some of the pockets where the parks are and where the opportunities are in terms of high-end eco-lodges, in terms of hotels, high-end villas, to really cater to the luxury segment that we attract on the continent, in Rwanda. In terms of transports and logistics, we're really starting to see, as we position ourselves as the manufacturing hub for the region, a need for us to be able to connect seamlessly throughout the region, but as well as Sub-Saharan Africa and Northern Africa. And here, there's ample opportunities to create dry ports and corridors. There's e-mobility and mass transit, as there's free movement of people across the region. There's also the new Kigali International Airport, which is going to be an anchor infrastructure for us that further position us as a global hub in terms of business and in terms of tourism as well. Another particular interesting sector for us is the finance and digital and financial services sector. Today, we know that when capital is deployed on the continent or is looking for a place on the continent, it most likely will go to Mauritius or outside of the continent. And we've created a center just so we're able to cater to the capital that wants to come on the continent and stay on the continent. Truly a neutral platform, a home for financial managers, family offices, financial institutions that are looking to set up their capital in a trustable environment and neutral environment. Without forgetting the digital services, there's need, as was mentioned earlier, for BPO, AI, data centers, as we're in a rush, all of us around the continent, to answer to this AI quest. When we look at financing, we don't just look at it from, with a traditional financing lens, we're also looking at green financing. And today, with our partner, the Rwanda Green Fund, they've also created a platform where you can cater to green investments or green opportunities within the various sectors that I mentioned earlier. And this is just a snapshot of how much they were able to mobilize and how much is waiting for you in terms of investment. I come to the end of my presentation, and I want to say that all of these activities are coordinated by the Rwanda Development Board, which is Rwanda's one-stop center for investors, where we walk with you throughout your journey from company registration all the way to reinvestment, which is what we're essentially going for at this moment. So I welcome you, and I invite you to join us and to truly create Rwanda as a base for you to scale. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Michelle Umurungi. That deserves another round of applause. She has given us a clear presentation on opportunities present and how Rwanda is your key entry point. And now our next session